Well, good morning, everyone. And once again, welcome to another week live podcast. The Doctor is in podcast and live Facebook to the Martin Clinic Facebook group. And we sure appreciate you coming on. A few of you say hello just so I know you're watching. And Nick, good morning to you. And good to have you on. Lisa, how are you this morning? Good to have you on. And Anna, and Linda, and Jerry, friends from Nouveau-Brunswick. We're going to get out there one day, Jerry, to see to see you guys. I feel like I know you so much just from online. Denise, and good morning to you. And who else is on? Marin, how are you? And Julie, Andrea, yeah, we want to get out to Nouveau-Brunswick. Good to have you guys on. Sherry, good morning to you. Elaine, and many, many, many on. Okay, Dan and Lynn, you guys are great. Vicky, Sheila, Monique, okay, a few more. Another Nicole, and you guys are great. Thanks so much for coming on. I don't know, Todd, how are you? And Rita, friends from Nouveau-Brunswick, and Blanche from Quebec. Bonjour, Blanche. Nahid, you guys are great. Okay, so Ruth Ann from PEI. Oh, beautiful. I was supposed to go do a seminar and take actually a cruise seminar from Boston out to Newfoundland in September, but it's been canceled because of COVID. I would have loved to have gone out to PEI and all that, get out in that area, and Cape Breton and all the beautiful areas of Canada. Okay, so good morning to you, and I'll get started here. Suzanne and Marina from Newfoundland too, and Jeanette from Gatineau. And anybody on in the U.S. with us this morning? If you are, I haven't seen you yet. Okay, I know there is. So, and Jean, good morning to you. Rosa. Okay, here we go. Arlene, I have to go. Okay, Jessica and Sandra. Okay, so what we're doing this morning, if you saw the headline, is Black Lives Matter. Okay, so that's all over the news. And Black Lives Matter, right? So it's a big, big thing in news. But I want to bring this from a different perspective for Black Lives Matter. I want to read you some statistics that you don't hear about too much for the African American population in the United States. It's actually very frightening for them. You know, never mind their past, it's their future I'm worried about. So Black lives do matter. Look what it says here, okay? And I am going to tie this in this morning as we talk about food. And good morning to you, Rebecca and Frekria. Let me just say that right, Esther. And I just want to come back. Fekria. Is that ever nice? I like that. Okay. Now, so listen to these statistics for the African American population in the United States. This is frightening, guys. This is frightening. Much worse than looking backwards and going back to their past. It's worse if they look forward, if they don't change this. And this is something I want to talk about this morning. The African American community is 80% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. The African American population is 80% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. Folks, and we'll go in this because many of you have followed us for years, and we've always talked about the link between diabetes and the other big killers. I'll go into that for a minute, but here's what it says. The African American community is 80% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes than the rest of the American population. Now, the African American population, the black population in the United States, is 10% of the population, approximately. 80% more likely to get diagnosed with diabetes. And secondly, they're 70% more likely to be obese. So here's what I want to bring out, okay? Not to get into politics, but I have to get into politics a little bit. Because what they're missing, what the whole population is missing with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, with, defunding the police and all that. And, listen, it's not whether that's legitimate or not. It's what they're doing is missing the biggest point of all. The one that, that I never thought in my lifetime I would see a virus bring the world to its knees, which it did. But again, even with the COVID, as we have explained, it's not the virus. It is the health of the population that's the most important thing. So I want to emphasize that Black lives do matter, but will not do anything for the Black population if we don't educate them and everybody else, of course, but them with the truth about the disaster that's waiting for them. Like I said, Black Lives Matter is more about, going backwards and saying, look, we were mistreated, police brutality and whatever. Look, that is, you guys be informed and make up your mind on that. But I'm more concerned with my dear brothers and sisters of the human population that they're on the Titanic. They are headed for disaster in health because of their predisposition to diabetes. Now listen, I just want to bring this to the Canadian population for a minute. Do you know that our First Nation, the Indigenous people here in Canada, and I'm sure it's the same in the United States, would have those same type of statistics, 80% more likely to become diabetic. The Indigenous people, our First Nations, they were never meant to eat sugar. Sugar it's poison for everybody, but especially for the Indigenous people. They're not meant for it. They can't handle it. Their bodies can't handle it. And even in the Mid-East, in Egypt, there's they got about 50%. In the Middle East, they got 50% diabetes rates. There's certain segments of the population that are worse. And you know what's happening? And I think it'll affect a generation of, the rest of us in North America. That we're literally changing because of our bad eating. We're literally, and you see it in the younger and younger population, even amongst the Caucasian. We're not as susceptible, but because of our bad eating, it is affecting the younger generation. I used to be shocked that in the last 20 years of my practice changed because I was seeing so many children, not only with ADD and ADHD. I mean, there was some of that, obviously, in the 60s and 70s, but it's like an epidemic today. And like I've talked to you about autism, it's an epidemic today. Why? And I always ask that question, why? So Black lives do matter, but we need to help them. And we need to help ourselves because listen to this. This came out in 2018. Here's the statistics from the Center for Disease Control in the United States, the CDC, here's what they say. The cost of healthcare, okay? So it was a report, the cost of healthcare. And in Canada, we're the same, the cost of healthcare. Now, first of all, 90% of the budget of all healthcare in Canada and the United States, 90% of it is spent on the management of chronic disease. On the management of chronic disease. 10% it isn't for prevention, because you rarely ever talk about it. You see, medicine, and God love them. You have a heart attack, you need a doctor. You need to go to emergency. You get in a car accident, you need to go to emergency. Of course, for sure. And you need antibiotics or whatever. But that's not what's killing our healthcare system. Because our healthcare system isn't a healthcare system at all. It is a disease care system. We need to understand that. And no politician wants to talk about it. Even during COVID, they're talking about wearing a mask, social distancing, wash your hands, don't touch your face, when nobody's talking about the elephant in the room that we have talked about here ad nauseum. And that is people that get sick from even COVID have pre-existing conditions. And the worst one is diabetes. But I'm going to show you this morning, again, the connection to all the major killers in our society today. The ones that are costing our health care, so-called, a fortune. We're going to go broke, guys. You know, with this COVID, I've just, you know, I was trying to warn people for two things with COVID. When you shut everything down and you isolate people, I get it. If you're an infectious disease person, all you're thinking about is the virus, right? So you get it. Now they're in our hometown, Sudbury, they're going to make us, you go inside into a public building of any kind, you need to wear masks starting Wednesday. So today is Monday, 2 days from now, Wednesday, it's mandatory. We have no COVID left in Northern Ontario. It's gone. In Sudbury, there's not one case. It's all resolved. But when you're in infectious disease or public health, you know what you're thinking? Well, we hammered the curve down, but that's what they said they were. The reason we closed down, we hammered the curve down. In Sudbury, we never had a curve. We had a pancake. The hospitals were never overwhelmed. Well, they were never overwhelmed anywhere because people stayed away from the hospitals because they were more scared of the virus than they were of their heart. Do you know that someone in Sudbury, I know for a fact, died of a blood clot that got into the lungs? They died of a blood clot. And the reason they died is because they wouldn't go to the hospital. They were more scared of the virus. They as their legs swelled up with a blood clot, and had they gone to emergency and got an anti-clotting medication like Plavix or heparin or one of the Eliquis or whatever, they would have dissolved the clot. But the clot, because they delayed, the guy didn't want, I know this for a fact, I know the story. And the guy wouldn't go to the hospital because he said, well, I can't go to the hospital, I might get that virus. And it killed him. But what I want to talk to you about just for a second as I go off on a little rabbit trail is just to tell you, and this is what I've been predicting all along. One of the biggest things with this whole thing with COVID and fear is the amount of mental health problems that are coming to a theater near you. When you isolate people, when they do not work, and kids who, can't go to couldn't go to a playground and couldn't go to school, and all these things, folks, I'm telling you, the mental health ramifications will be worse than this virus big time. And remember, all I'm saying is this, that the people generally, there's a few people, I understand that got the virus and died that were healthy. But the vast majority of it was in the senior homes, the extended care homes, and people who had pre-existing conditions. It's as simple as that. If you look at it, those there are the facts. And all I'm saying is, even in COVID, we missed it. We missed it because we didn't learn the lesson. We're going to go back. If there ever is a new normal or a normal, I don't know if we'll ever be back to normal. Do you ever think you'll ever go to a ball game again? I don't know. Maybe you will, but you might have to wear a mask or whatever. We talked about that the other day. Look, I don't know what the new normal, is school's always going to be different, kids 6 feet apart or whatever. I don't know. I never thought when there was no COVID in Sudbury that they would make you wear a mask. And my son, should have been a lawyer, Dr. Junior, he should have been a legal and a doctor because he's got a legal beagle mind. He really does. He called the public health unit here and asked a few questions. He said, I just want to ask some questions about the mask. For people that are not wearing it, are they going to be ostracized? If you have asthma or COPD, you can't wear a mask. Makes you worse. And the public health unit said, oh, yeah, that's right. No, you don't have to wear a mask if you got a health condition. The problem is, have you ever gone into a store lately? People are miserable. I was in Canadian Tire the other day, and a lady was in I come down the aisle, and this lady was here, and I was 20 feet from her still, and she started panicking. Like, what are you doing in my aisle? And she had a mask on and gloves on, and I didn't know if she was getting ready to rob the place, but she was in a real panic. I was coming within, I wasn't even close to her. And she ran out of the aisle. I think she was going to get security to come and throw me out. But people are uptight. They're miserable. So what if you don't have a mask because you got COPD? What are you going to put, a sign on your head? Hey, I'm not wearing a mask because I got COPD. Well, Tony Jr. was asking that question at the public health. You know what the other question is? Why the mask? If there's no more COVID left, why are you doing it? Good question. The media should be asking that question, not my son. And the third question is, for how long? Well, you know what the answer was? For how long? Until we find a vaccine. We're going to wear a mask. You see, even though there's no COVID, in Sudbury there's no COVID. There's 0 cases. They're going to make us wear a mask until they find a vaccine. That's what they said. That's what the public health unit of Sudbury said. But the public health unit has never once talked about the pre-existing conditions. And we better tackle the pre-existing conditions. And the number one is diabetes. And that's why Black lives matter, and your life matters, and your family lives matter, and everybody's life matter when it comes to health. Isn't that incredible? And here's the cost. I'm just going to bring you in the cost. So again, post-COVID, folks, we spend so much money. We had to supplement incomes, and we had to finance students and businesses and unemployment insurance. And I mean, think about it. Our budgets are going to be upside down, and then we still are treating and managing disease, but not talking about prevention of disease. I will come to it. I promise. But listen, the cost of healthcare, this is in 2018, the most latest statistic of overall cost. For diabetes, you know how much it costs? In the United States, $327 billion in 2018. Heart and stroke, $290 billion. 327 for diabetes. It's more expensive to manage diabetes than it is to treat heart disease. Can you imagine if you have a heart attack? We don't see the bill in Canada, but if you have a heart attack in the United States or whatever, and especially if you have to have open heart where they do a bypass or whatever, I mean, you're looking at well over $100,000 of cost. Heart and stroke, $290 billion with a B dollars. Cancer, $174 billion a year in the United States in 2018. Guys, I know we throw numbers around. And, billions, trillions, we used to, when I was a kid, I never even heard the word trillion. If someone was a millionaire, I mean, wow, right? Now that's nothing. Bill Gates and that, they're billionaires, right? Like, billion, like. And obesity, okay, $147 billion a year for cost us taxpayers. Guys, the government is us. Now, all of the above that I just mentioned are connected because the treatment of diabetes was $327 billion, the number one. It's very expensive to manage diabetes, guys. It's very expensive. Because diabetics, everything goes wrong from their eyes to their kidneys, to their heart, to their brain, to their legs, their circulation, whatever. Everything goes wrong with diabetes. If you're a diabetic, you're 60, 70% more likely to have a heart attack. If you're a diabetic, you are 60 to 70% more likely to have Alzheimer's. If you're a diabetic, you are 50 to 60% more likely to get cancer. Everything goes wrong. Diabetes is, and this is actually my new book. In the first chapter, I explain all this, or is it in, I think it's in the introduction that I explain all of this. It's all connected. And what society could do for Black Lives Matter and for the Caucasian population is if we got schooled, educated on prevention of these diseases. And diabetes is 100% preventable. Type 2 diabetes, not type 1. Type 1 is autoimmune. But even then, okay, but type 2 diabetes or adult onset, I call it children's diabetes, even. Because children they become pre-diabetics they can become a pre-diabetic at 5 years old. A lot of times it starts with their formula, with all the sugar that's at it, and the soy. So all I'm saying, guys, is that we miss out because we're not talking about the right subject. We're talking politics, and we're talking about a mask, and we're talking about all these and our rights and all this and that, but we're not talking about the most important thing, the one that is crushing our economy. the one that is destroying our health. It's our food. It's our diet. Diabetes is food. It's sugar. Heart disease. I've said it to you 1,000 times. Another study came out this week, or last week. But I'm going to bring it to you this week. No matter what your LDL, you know how I always talk about that. I don't care what your LDL. You want to show me your LDL? Your LDL is your bad cholesterol. Your doctor is going to fixate on it, but I don't want to talk about it because I want to talk about your HDL. And I want to talk about the ratio between your triglycerides, your TGs, and your HDL. Because I can tell you in 5 seconds, if I look at those two numbers, what is your insulin doing? That's what because if your insulin is upside down, if you have insulin resistance, you are really a diabetic already. The last thing that happens to a diabetic is their blood sugar goes high. Because your body, it keeps your blood sugar within a very narrow range. Everything in your body works hard to get the sugar into a very, very narrow range. So when you understand that, it's food. And listen, diabetes, insulin, it affects your TG and your HDL. So what does that mean? That's heart disease and stroke, which costs, so diabetes is 327 billion and heart and stroke is 200 billion. I'll just stop there for a second. So listen to me, my African American friends and Canadian indigenous people. Well, this is for everybody, for you especially, because you're already 80% more likely to become diabetics. If you become a diabetic, even if you're a pre-diabetic and your insulin's high, your risk. So this is 88% of the population. We now go in bigger. All lives matter now. Okay? Let me tie this together. The Center for Disease Control said something in 2017. The biggest story of the last 100 years, in my opinion, the biggest story in health in the last 100 years is a little story that the Center for Disease Control came out with a paper stating that 88% of the population had some sign of metabolic disorder. And you know, when you say metabolic disorder, nobody even, well, I'm not saying nobody, but very few people, well, okay, what are they talking about? But you had to read the story to go, guys, it blew me away. It blew me away because what were they saying? Well, metabolic syndrome is characterized by, so they said 80, almost 90% of the population, I think it's 90, by the way. 90% of the population are messed up metabolically. So when you read the article, they said 88%. I say it's 90%. I say it's 90%. But it's so important that you understand the significance of that. That 90% of the population is metabolically messed up. And when you read the story, it said, well, the number one problem is insulin. The Center for Disease Control said it. Insulin. Folks, you only use insulin. You only use insulin for food. You don't secrete insulin unless you're eating. And you don't secrete a lot of insulin unless you're eating carbs. So, it's incredible. Think about what I'm just saying. If the Center for Disease Control has said this about the African American population, and Health Canada has said it about the Indigenous population, but they don't do anything about it. They tell you that, but they don't talk about, well, here's what you need to do. Because the link between insulin and fatty liver and heart disease and stroke and cancer and Alzheimer's. Remember, Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. It's all connected. The ones that kill us the most, the ones that are bankrupting our economy. We can only deficit finance. I think in the United States, what's it up to now? $23 trillion. In Canada, we're at the same rate. Well, we got, not at 23 trillion, but we got a huge, huge deficit. And we have to service that debt. And what that does is it makes you cut back on other procedures or whatever. I mean, when you run out of money, anyway, you just can only print money for so long. But all I'm saying is they've missed the whole point. They missed the whole point. And that's why I've been so adamant about prevention, guys. You as an individual. There's no guarantees in life, no guarantees. But you are diminishing your risk. You're diminishing your risk if you cut out your sugars and cut out your carbs. And this is why I constantly tell you about this. The rates of obesity, the rates of heart disease, the rates of cancer, the rates of diabetes are all connected to your insulin. You hear about somebody with high blood pressure, they got trouble with insulin. Okay? You hear about someone with, there's a bee coming around. Okay. If you hear about, okay, where is it? I gotta swat this bee that's all around me. Okay. See him? Okay, he left. Okay. When you're outdoors, this is what can happen. No. So what am I saying? Okay? Prevention. Okay? Prevention. You guys know this. When you, the news behind the news is you understand that you take control yourself. And the much influence you have around you with your family and friends, as much as you can do, educate them to this. Because the world is missing the big story. In Black Lives Matter and all the rest of it, they're missing the big story. The one that will affect their future and affect our future. Big time. Okay, so let me just stop now this morning and thank you for watching. Now, this week, I just want to give you a heads up. We're going to do, tomorrow, I think, we're going to do how to do a real detox. I think you'll appreciate that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Because a lot of people ask me about doing a detox. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, okay? And we're going to look this week at, there's a new story out on Beyond Meat. I want to bring that out to you. And there's some other good stories, good studies that came out. So I'll bring them to you this week, Lord willing. So if you have any questions, Friday we're going to do question and answer. And if you have a chance, share this. Get people signed up to the podcast. Because sometimes people can't come on with us, but they can listen to this as we turn it into a podcast, okay? So love you guys. Talk to you tomorrow, Lord willing.